It's 9 minutes after 8, Rhema Brekky, on your Friday morning, and being the second Friday morning of the month, we are joined by our resident naturopath and nutritionist, Kelli Kieselbach, is on the line with us this morning. Kelli, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm going really, really well, thanks. A little bit washed out here, but that's, par for the course, I guess. East Coast weather, you got to love it around the Central Coast this time of the year, I guarantee it. Now, of course, look, it's great to have you on this morning, and we do have two very big topics now. Some of these, they can be linked with each other, but being the type of month that it is, I think health-wise, health awareness-wise, there's a lot of things to do with autoimmunity and different types of chronic conditions. And this morning we're looking at chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. And look, they're pretty common conditions, aren't they?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, they're becoming more common as well. So, and particularly, they're probably getting more awareness now as well since the pandemic and long COVID kind of has been linked a little bit with chronic fatigue syndrome. So there's a bit more awareness around it as well, which I think is a good thing overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, let's get started this morning. So what is chronic fatigue syndrome?
Okay, so chronic fatigue syndrome, which is also called myalgic encephalomyelitis. So you'll often see it written as MECFS.
I'll see
So you don't have to. So you don't have to say the whole thing. Yeah. So it is a neuroimmune disorder. So it can be confused for just chronic fatigue. So obviously people can experience chronic fatigue due to a number of different reasons, but this is its own distinct disorder that involves the nervous system and immune system, but really affects the whole body. The key symptom around chronic fatigue syndrome is what we call post-exertional malaise. So this is when any exertion, whether it's physical, mental, makes all your symptoms and especially the fatigue worse. So, and it can be, it can be mild, so people can still, do day-to-day things and maybe they can work part-time or whatever, but it can be quite severe. So about 25% have severe illness, and that means they're unable to leave their house and in many cases unable to leave their bed either and require carers and things to look after them.
Yeah, wow. So how is this diagnosed? Because I think a lot of people out there, particularly in 2024, in the world that we live in, I think a lot of us do experience fatigue throughout the day, or even sometimes it can be ongoing. So how will we find out about it?
Yeah, so it can be a really long and arduous process. There is a diagnostic criteria, but it's pretty much first a process of eliminating all other possible causes. There are no sort of blood tests or anything like that can tell you, yes, this is what you have. That's not to say that there aren't biological abnormalities. There's definitely physiological things going on. It's just that the common tests that are available to us, nothing can definitively say, yes, you have this condition. So usually a process of elimination, and then eventually a physician or maybe a rheumatologist will say, look, you fit this criteria. We think this is what you have.
Yeah. Now, who is most likely to be affected by chronic fatigue syndrome?
So it can affect anyone of any age, so including children and teenagers and older people. It is seen more commonly in women. So about 75% do tend to be women. Not sure why that is, but that tends to be consistent with a lot of chronic conditions as well.
Yeah, right. And what are some of the I guess the modalities that you would use in your practice to actually treat a condition like CF?
Yeah, because it is a very complex condition that involves the whole body, it does require a really holistic approach. And there's a lot of variability between individuals as well. So we really need to look at the underlying drivers and causes for that individual and what's going on for them. I would be using diet strategies. I'd be using nutritional and herbal supplements to try and address those underlying drivers. We also do a lot of lifestyle work. So there are sort of four main areas that we want to address, and that is gut health, nervous system regulation, immune regulation, and also mitochondria. So the mitochondria being the little batteries within our cells that produce energy, which there's dysfunction there. So we know that those four areas at different levels impact and cause the symptoms of CFS. So we're wanting to get in there and rebalance and support those areas. And by doing that, we can help see changes in the symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know that, I guess in the past, there may have been the standard approach was just like, okay, just trying to get some rest, maybe here's some medication for it or something. But I think the way that the medical profession is these days, they're sort of taking the more holistic approach, aren't they? So, GPs working in conjunction with you guys who would probably maybe even fall under the allied health sort of category as well, yeah?
Yeah, so we would fall into allied health. There is a real need to shift the focus to being more holistic, and I think that's slowly happening. The other thing that is really important, because with chronic fatigue syndrome, the fatigue is not relieved by rest. So just telling someone to rest more, stress less, exercise, bad advice. That needs to be done very, very strategically and very, very carefully in people with these conditions. But we do talk a lot about pacing as well. So we talk a lot about managing the symptoms by staggering your activities so that you can avoid what we call crashes, or that post-exertion, that worsening of symptoms that comes from doing things.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. We are joined by our resident naturopath and nutritionist, Kelli Kieselbach, is on the line with us this morning. We'll take a quick break. When we come back with Kelli, we'll be chatting about a little bit about fibromyalgia. So make sure you stick around. This is Rhema Brekky here on your Friday morning. Mick Wright with you through until 9, of course. We are joined by our resident resident naturopath and nutritionist, Kelli Kieselbach is on the line with us. And this morning, big topic to kick off, and that was chronic fatigue syndrome. But now we're about to get into fibromyalgia, Kelli. This is another big one as well.
Yes, it is. Very big.
So I guess the thing is, probably a lot of people have heard about it. It is Fibromyalgia Awareness Month. Now, we've got the day, I think, tomorrow, isn't it?
The 12th,
The
so
12th.
Sunday.
Yep,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
Right on Mother's Day of all days, but that's the way it
I
works
know.
out these things.
It landed.
So what is fibromyalgia?
Yeah, so fibromyalgia is a pain processing disorder. So people experience pain of all kinds. So it can be constant pain in one area. Usually, more commonly, it can migrate around the body and be worse at different places at different times. It can be aching, stabbing, burning. It can have unusual sensations like feelings of itchiness or like bugs crawling on the skin. And often they'll have what we call allodynia, which is pain in response to normal stimulation. So if someone gives you a hug or your clothing's a bit tight, those types of things can cause pain for someone with fibromyalgia. And it is its own condition, but it's also commonly seen with chronic fatigue syndrome and some other conditions as well. There's also a whole bunch of other symptoms that come with it. So it's not uncommon for people to also have migraines and headaches, extreme fatigue, gut issues, mood issues, sleep disturbances.
Yeah.
So and again, it's quite complex. Yeah.
Yeah, so because it is there is the connection there between neurological things that are happening in the brain and, of course, the pain receptor levels. So that everything is out of whack there. Obviously, like I say, just different things that we would do normally can cause pain. So if you are experiencing some of those type of symptoms and you're thinking, maybe something else, I mean, what is the best course of action? I mean, how is this one diagnosed?
Yeah, so it can be, once again, tricky diagnosis. Again, you want to eliminate all, other conditions that it could possibly be. Usually it's diagnosed by a rheumatologist. So they'll go through, make sure there's no, other autoimmune conditions, no structural issues, because usually the pain is in the absence of any obvious injury or cause. So, that's usually how it's diagnosed. If people are in those early stages and they're wondering, this sounds like me, I would go talk to your GP, about potentially going down the diagnostic path or getting some other things ruled out.
Mm-hmm.
If you've done all that, then I would go and see a naturopath or nutritionist who specializes in this kind of area to get some support. Because even if you don't have a diagnosis, you can start working towards some, gentle therapies that might help you manage the symptoms.
Yeah, and you say with chronic fatigue syndrome, it's sort of 75% women are mostly affected there. What about with fibromyalgia?
Yeah.
Is this, again, more common to
Similar.
the females? Yeah?
Yes, yeah, it is. And it's interesting as well because people with fibromyalgia will often see that their pain or their symptoms get worse at certain times in their cycle. It's also not unusual for women going through perimenopause and those hormonal changes to have their symptoms come on during that period. So we're not sure whether there's some complex interaction with the hormones there. But yeah, it does appear to be more common in females, but men definitely do get it as well.
Now, can illness or like any previous illnesses or diseases, anything like that, viruses sort of kick that off at all? What about lifestyle factors, maybe hereditary things, something in the genes?
Yeah, so hereditary, I'm not so sure with fibro. With chronic fatigue syndrome, there does seem to be some familial link. But more so with chronic fatigue syndrome, we see viruses, trauma. There's a higher incidence of adverse childhood events in people who have chronic fatigue syndrome. So that, ongoing intense stress. With fibromyalgia, people can, just develop it quite quickly overnight, or it can come on gradually over time. And with fibromyalgia, it can definitely be trauma, either physical or emotional, psychological stress. So, after a surgery or after a period of ongoing stress. There's also a really big link with gut health in both of these conditions. So a development in fibromyalgia, particularly, we see 70% of people also have an IBS diagnosis. And it's very, very rare that I see people with both fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome that don't also have some gut issues as well.
Yep.
And probably due to that really strong connection between the gut and the brain and the gut and the nervous system as well. So, so to answer your question, it really can be different for each individual, but we definitely see a connection between trauma and the onset of these conditions. Viruses, particularly with chronic fatigue syndrome, can do it, and physical trauma as well, so surgeries and that type of thing.
Yeah, cool. Now, to wrap up this morning, you've got a couple of free workshops happening as well. You want to tell us about those?
Yeah, so in honor of Awareness Month, May Awareness Month, I've put together a free online workshop to give people an introduction into these conditions, into how naturopathic medicine and nutrition can support someone with these conditions. We'll look at what some of the research says in terms of what causes and drives these conditions, and also look at some testing options and some of my favorite evidence-based treatment options as well. So that's available to anyone. You do have to register for this, but you can find the links for these either on my website, on the homepage. You just scroll down a little bit, you'll see it there. Also on my social media pages. So Instagram is Kelli K_naturopath, Kelli with an I. And Facebook is Kelli K Naturopath as well. So yeah, if it's something that you're interested in, or perhaps you're a carer of someone with one of these conditions or both, it would be a really great thing for you to, join us.
Yeah, that would be. Now, when are you looking at kicking that off?
Yeah, so the first one we're running next Friday, the 17th of May, and that's 1:00 Adelaide time, and then I'll be running it again on the 25th of May, which will be 11 a.m. Adelaide time.
Awesome.
So for most of your listeners, I think you're half an hour ahead. So
yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah.
All right, that is great. That is great news. And look, I think a lot of people will jump on board with that one too, Kelli, because again, These are big conditions, very, very common conditions around the place. Lots of people do struggle with them, and a lot of people probably have them, don't even realise it. They're just looking at something else going on, or they're just trying to push through or whatever, maybe going from, doctor to doctor and not really getting a proper diagnosis.
And one of the big things, if we've got time, is just there's a lot of medical trauma for people with these conditions, because often people get dismissed, or they're told, oh, you're just anxious, or you just need to sleep more, or, these types of things. And they can get easily dismissed because there's no real obvious, people don't look unwell often.
Sure.
And it can be really quite distressing for people when they know that something's not right in themselves and they feel really, really unwell, not able to do the things they love and have been able to do all their life. So there is a lot of grief around this and through often. And it's also very isolating, because unless you've experienced it yourself, it's very difficult to understand that, oh, don't you just sleep more and feel better? Or don't you just feel good when you go for a run or a walk? And it's definitely not that simple. So
that's right.
Yeah, just be aware if you know people with these conditions, to be encouraging and be mindful that their situation is real and it's different to how we experience fatigue and tiredness.
Yeah, for sure. Now, can you give us the dates and the times again for those free workshops?
Yes, absolutely. Friday, May the 17th at 1 p.m. Adelaide time is the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, Saturday, the 25th of May at 11 a.m. Adelaide time. And you can sign up to those via my social media pages or my website, kellyk.com.au, Kelly with an I, k.com.au.
Yep, kellyk.com.au is the website there. And, of course, we can follow you on your Facebook and Instagram as well, which is great.
Yes.
Kelly, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this morning. And look, I know that that's going to help a lot of people out there, particularly around the coast here and other areas, who will hear this at some point down the track. So, and again, I'll be letting people know about the free workshops as well over the next week or so, and making sure that people get signed up for that, because it's a huge one, chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. You hold the line there. I'll get back to you very, very shortly. That is Kelli Kieselbach, our resident naturopath and nutritionist, joining us this morning here on Rhema Brekky. Stay with us. We've got the 8:30 news coming up next.